I teach a course on entrepreneurship at UT Austin, and what we try to impart there is basic frameworks and how things should be done. Of course, it's different from what the world is going to throw at you, but at least you have a starting point, right? So it's quite akin to that, where you start with some good tested ideas, and then you have the tools to continuously improve upon those. So having that basic framework, having that view of the world that allows you to deal with what the world throws at you, that's something universities do really well.
Every founder has heard this advice at least once: follow your passion. But if you look closely at successful entrepreneurs, researchers, and innovators, very few of them followed a straight path. Sometimes a computer engineer becomes a management researcher. Sometimes years in industry lead to academia. And sometimes the best lessons about building startups come from someone who has spent years studying how innovation actually happens. Our guest today has dedicated his career to understanding what makes organizations innovate, how entrepreneurs make decisions, and why some ideas succeed while others don't. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of School to Startup, brought to you by Tracxn, a private market intelligence platform that's been supporting the global university ecosystem for over 12 years. To our university partnerships, we work with institutions driving innovation, entrepreneurship, and this series highlights the academic leaders making that happen. I'm Harish, your host today. It's my pleasure to welcome Professor Harsh Ketkar, Assistant Professor of Management at University of Texas at Austin. Professor Harsh, welcome to School to Startup.
Thanks for inviting me on the podcast.
Great. Let's begin at the beginning. You studied computer science, completed MBA at IIM Calcutta, worked across different industries, and eventually chose academia. That's quite an interesting journey. What inspired that transition?
So, uh, so I have a simple answer. I mean, I love reading and I love spending time in libraries. So I did work in industry after my undergrad, which was in computer science, and one of those experiences was in a startup as well. So it was quite educational in that aspect. Uh, but when I went to do my MBA at IIM Calcutta, I discovered the wonderful library on campus, and I came across some research on modularity, which is also, of course, it's closely linked to business, but it's also closely linked to computer science. And there's this book which talks about about the IBM PC and how they lost market share to Apple, and that just fascinated me. So it pushed me to work on a term paper with a professor, and I thought, well, this is fun. It allows me a lot of intellectual freedom. It allows me to play with ideas. So why not turn this into a career? And so I started applying to PhD programs and got into Michigan.
Great. Outside work, I noticed you're interested in philosophy, history, classical music, jazz, and you're also a Jeopardy fan. So I'm curious, uh, do these interests somehow influence the way you think about business and innovation?
I think so. I mean, especially in research, where especially in business and innovation, I think so. I've done a lot of quizzing, and I know Bangalore has a very active quizzing circle. Pune, where I did my undergrad, also has that. So there is a very thriving quizzing community out there, and I think one of the things and that is valued in quizzing is to bring you know disparate topics together towards an answer. And so there is a bit of that playing with ideas, bringing different threads together and so on, which is very valuable and which sometimes helps me a lot when I'm grappling with research questions. But it's also true for business, right? So a manager's work or a startup founder's work is extremely complex. There are so many things coming at them from all directions, and they have to synthesize and make sense of what's going on. So I think there are quite a few parallels, and again, I mean, I get to use my some of the qualities that I learned from my hobbies. I get to use in my work, so that's always fun.
We're talking about that Jeopardy. When you watch that, do you actually answer the questions before the contestants?
Well, sometimes, not always. It's I mean, of course, they I mean, it's the questions are great, and I really love the show. But I love almost all quiz shows as well, other quiz shows as well.
Interesting. So let's talk about startups. Many people believe successful startups begin with brilliant ideas. From everything you have studied and observed, how much of a startup success comes from the original idea?
So that's a great question. So I think ideas are cheap. Uh, I mean, that's not to say that good ideas don't matter at all, but ideas, I mean, a lot of us have ideas which ultimately don't get implemented, right? They fall by the wayside. So all of us get ideas, all of us are smart. What matters is whether they are going to work out there, right, in the wild, where so you have a great idea, but when the rubber hits the road, they just wither away, right? They just don't work as well as intended, right? So what's important is starting with a grain of an idea and constantly implementing something, taking it out in the wild, testing it on customers or with real people or in real world situations, see what works, see what doesn't work, and continuously iterating the process. I mean, a lot of startup founders do that. They start with an MVP. This is also what's called as the lean startup framework as well, right? uh, we think it's common knowledge, but it's many we as humans, we fall in love with our own ideas, right? And again, it's the same with academics as well. We do fall in love with our own ideas as well. So what's important is starting with an idea, going out, testing it, getting feedback, and continuously improving it. I think that it has to be a living idea, not something that's cast in stone.
Interesting. And also, students often tell themselves, I'll start once I have a unique idea. Do you think that's the right approach, or is uniqueness sometimes overrated?
So I think uniqueness is needed, but it has to be living. So it has to emerge from experimentation. So I mean, I don't think any of us, I mean, neither founders nor academics have this luxury of, sitting in a room and thinking all day about coming up with unique ideas. That usually doesn't happen. Uh, I think it's important to have a unique idea, but what's also important is to keep it unique. Once ideas are out there as an implementation, they don't stay unique by definition, right? So your competitors are going to emulate you, or at least address some of the weaknesses that your idea is going to have. So you have to constantly keep on iterating and improving those ideas.
Right. And since this series is called School to Startup, I would love to ask this. What do universities prepare students really well for? And what can only be learned after, stepping into the real world?
Again, that's a wonderful question. I think what universities you know so I teach a course on entrepreneurship at UT Austin, and what we try to impart there is basic frameworks and how things should be done. Of course, it's different from what the world is going to throw at you, but at least you have a starting point, right? So it's quite akin to that, where you start with some good tested ideas, and then you have the tools to continuously improve upon those. So having that basic framework, having that view of the world that allows you to deal with what the world throws at you, that's something universities do really well. Now, is it exactly what the world is going to throw at you? No, but it gives you the wherewithal to deal with what it throws at you.
Interesting. Say, suppose a student walks into your office tomorrow with five startup ideas. So, how would you help them decide which one is worth pursuing?
Yeah, so that's that happens quite a lot, by the way. So not only my students who have to work on their project, right? So they have to develop an idea, and and of course uh, they 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 have to submit it at the end of the semester. But I also get a lot of emails from ex students as well as other students who did not attend my class to evaluate their startup ideas, because a lot of them are startup founders as well. uh, the first thing I tell them is, don't listen to me. Okay, now that might sound kind of counterintuitive, but what I tell them that, look, I'm not your customer, right? I'm not going to be your user. And so these five ideas, maybe I like this one idea, but it will be a professor who likes this idea. It won't be your customer who likes that idea. So get out of the building, collect data, talk to people. I mean, that's something that's becoming rarer, right? Talking in person to people and having a conversation. Go and collect all that messy data, sit down, make sense of it, go back to the drawing board, and then you will know yourself which one is going to be the most feasible idea out there for now.
Interesting. And talking about building that company, right? So you have researched why some organization consistently outperform others. So what do the best startups get right that most of the average startup often overlook?
So there are many things, right? It's a multi-pronged thing. So the first thing is, I mean, they say culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? It eats strategy. And I think what good startup founders do is to build that fostering culture which allows developing ideas and nurturing those ideas and test, uh, being very data oriented, in the sense that it's not the most important person speaking whose opinion matters, but it's about what the data are telling you, right? What the world is telling you about that idea. So culture, I think, first and foremost matters a lot. Secondly, again, I keep returning to that theme, but it's only those experimenting startups that do really well. And as some of my research shows that startups tend to be resource constrained, right? And one might think that what leads to failure is the lack of money, right? Of course, they are strapped for money, and but I think so. In fact, there is some other research which says that the biggest cause of failure is lack of product market fit, which means you haven't assessed it well as a founder, right? And so that product market fit, which evolves over time, is making sure that you're constantly experimenting, constantly trying out new things, keeping your product idea, your business model a living thing, is super important for startups to remain successful and relevant.
Interesting. Talking about that product market fit, is there another equally important factor that deserves much more attention?
Yes, absolutely. And one of the most underrated factors is organization design. And that's something which tends to get overlooked, but it's one of the most important strategic decisions that founders can make, and they should make. Now, most if you compare startups with more established firms, startups tend to be really agile, they tend to be decentralized. So some of my research looks at bossless firms. So there are some highly successful software firms like Valve Software, right? So the Steam platform, you must have, a lot of our viewers must have, those who are avid gamers at least, must have come across the Steam platform. So they call themselves a bossless firm. And what it means is that as an employee of Valve, you can choose the projects you want to work on, right? Nobody is going to tell you anything. You don't have to go to a boss for an approval, or ask anyone for permission, or you can join any project that you find interesting, or you can start any project that if you get an idea, you can start that project. Now that's important because having that, especially if you are in an industry which is changing very fast, you need to have as many ideas thriving, right? You need to have 1,000 flowers bloom, right? And so if you have this highly centralized ossified structure, which is going to be very very conservative about which ideas are going to bloom, I think that's not going to work out. That experimentation is not going to thrive. So and again, this is not like turning on a switch, whether you want to be decentralized or centralized. Again, it comes back to culture, right? So as a founder, if you say, hey, we are going to be decentralized from today, and then you kill every idea, right? So it's that comes up to you, or that you think is going to be dangerous, then that decentralization doesn't matter, right? It doesn't make any sense. So I think apart from having that culture of experimentation, I think choosing the right organization design is all, as an important strategic decision for founders as well.
Interesting. You also highlighted about the decision making, right? So many startups don't fail because of poor technology or poor people. They fail because of the poor decisions. That's what we have heard and we have seen. So from your perspective, what are some of the biggest decision making mistakes founders make?
Right. So a part of so one of the things I've seen is that it's a very critical decision for early stage startups is the timing of first funding. Now, as I mentioned, a lot of startups have these constraints, right? I mean, because your funding situation is going to determine the runway you have, how long you're going to try out new things or develop your product or achieve product market fit. Now, of course, your first funding is also a signal. It's not just money with no strings attached, right? And so what happens is that in that quest to get money, you know startup founders tend to accept funding very early, and that might have some pernicious effects down the line when it comes to innovation. So startups engage in bricolage, right? And bricolage is something very akin to jugaad, right? Where they tend to be scrappy. They don't have access to resources, but what they do is startup founders bring their unique perspective to create something magical out of resources lying in plain sight, right? Now that impulse gets blunted if you get funding too early or too much of it, right? And I think that's timing that funding right is something that startups need to think much harder about.
Interesting. I know you might have told this so many times during your class or outside the class as well. Let's imagine a student watching this today. They don't have funding, they don't have connections, they don't even know whether entrepreneurship is the right path. So they are just curious, simply curious, right? So, what's one message you would like them to make away or take away from today's conversation?
Oh, that's a big one. uh, I think these are, and I think this is a more futuristic looking, not futuristic, but more forward looking kind of an answer. I think we live in exciting times. I mean, we have had this conversation right till now, and we haven't even mentioned AI. But I know it's on everyone's minds, and it's changing everything around us. I think as a startup founder, this is the time where the cost of trying out new stuff has just gone down, right? So if you're not sure, go out and try out stuff, right? And so things that used to take much longer, right? So for instance, so much longer now, it's just so easy to implement. And I mean, I see that in my course as well. So until 2 years ago, students just had to do a presentation of their idea. Now I force them to make prototypes, right? And now it's no longer a barrier whether they are good at programming or not, and so on. They can just make prototypes and deploy them out in the wild and collect data, and a lot of my students have done that. So now if there's one thing that someone should take away from our conversation, is this: get out of the building, talk to people. That's something that AI still can't do. But for everything else, like making a product prototype, making a product website, it's all super cheap, right? It's there's not much effort in terms of time and money required to do that. So just go out and do it.
Interesting. Before we wrap up, where can our audience learn more about your work and stay updated with your latest research?
Absolutely. So I do have a website, my own personal website, ketkar.com. And some of my recent research was featured in Harvard Business Review from the September issue last year. This is my paper with my co-author Maria Roche at Harvard Business School. This is about constraints and startup early stage startup funding and how it affects innovation, as well as some published work. So I do have a paper on bossless firms, which was published in the Strategic Management Journal with my co-author Maciek Workiewicz, who's at ESSEC in France. And then there's this other paper on AI and strategic decision making, which was published in Strategy Science last year. They can, of course, they can find me on my homepage as well as at these outlets.
Perfect. All the links will be available in the comment section. Great, Professor Harsh. This was an insightful conversation. We explored how innovation is not just about having great idea, it's about asking better questions, making thoughtful decisions, and staying curious throughout the journey. Thank you so much for being part of School to Startup episode. It was a pleasure having you with us and learning from your experiences.
Thank you, Harish. It was great being on the podcast. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Great. And to everyone watching, if you enjoyed this conversation, please give this video a thumbs up, share your thoughts in the comments, subscribe to our channel, and click the bell icon so you never miss an episode. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode of School to Start.